You're listening to the Archaeology Podcast Network.
This is the CRM Archaeology Podcast. It's the show where we pull back the veil of cultural resources management archaeology and discuss the issues that everyone is concerned about. Welcome to the podcast. Hello and welcome to the CRM Archaeology Podcast, episode 236 for April 6th, 2022. I'm your host, Chris Webster. On today's show, we talk about night monitoring. So check the batteries in your headlamp because your night monitoring shift starts soon and because the CRM Archaeology Podcast starts right now. Welcome to the show, everyone. Joining me today is Heather in California.
Hi, everyone.
And Andrew in other California.
Hey, guys. How's it going?
All right. Well, we have got an interesting show today. And as you guys may have picked up on, we have been rotating around who has the topics for the week, unless we have something pressing to talk about. But we've been rotating around. And this week, it's Andrew's turn. So, Andrew, I'm going to throw it over to you to introduce our topic and our guest.
Okay. So I thought for this week, we could talk about night monitoring. And it's something that I was just sort of thinking about a couple of weeks ago. I was kind of going over my CRM experiences and thinking about, what was a little bit different than the norm. And I was like, oh, yeah, the night monitoring thing. That was kind of weird. And at around that time, I saw a post by one of my students, my student Neil. And he had posted about some of his experiences night monitoring. So I was like, wow, this is a really great time for me to bring a student of mine onto the show. And I thought that, all of us could just talk about our experiences in night monitoring and maybe some tips and tricks for how to night monitor better, what to do, because in a lot of ways, it is a very specific situation, where you're really kind of cut off by yourself sitting out there at 2 a.m. And so, if we can just kind of touch on that topic, expand on it, have a little fun with it, I thought that it would be great. So at first, I would like to intro my student, Neil Thompsett. Neil, how's it going?
Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me on the show.
Thanks,
and thank you. And the night shift, no matter where it is, I know we're speaking about CRM, but just in general is always a dirge. It's always a issue of just a test of the faith, test of your will, just understanding how much you want to go through with it. My experience in it was I was only in it for about 3 months. And I remember everyone was making sure that I was okay with it. And everyone's very gracious to make sure that I wasn't feeling stressed out or unvalued for doing this position. But I wanted to give it a try. I mean, the hours didn't seem too bad at first because it was technically split shift, but it still was pretty much night shift. And what I mean by that is the schedule that was given to me was between 7 p.m. to 2 to 3 a.m. So it's still not technically night shift because night shift officially begins 3 to 4 a.m. all the way to 11 or 12 in the afternoon.
Wow.
So the idea of all these rotational shifts is that you have to have 3 or 4 shift crews going on, especially if you're on a tight deadline.
Mm-hmm.
And basically the shift I was on, what was interesting was at least the best part about it was that you were able to at least get dinner in before most of the shift would begin. Whereas lunch for a night shift is quite difficult. You're pretty much alone on your own, and you pretty much should bring your own stuff. One thing that was different from it is that generally, in my experience, I've always had to, number one, be able to communicate with the operators, communicate with superintendents and foremans and dig crews in general, just so I can just get a consistency of what the project was, even though you would have the printout and know exactly what you're supposed to do. It's just to confirm, since everything changes all the time. Yeah, one of the things I noticed going in specifically with CRM is that you're really alone, and it's just you and the dig crew. And there will be, and basically just humongous work lights shining and random silence for a long time, and then a cluster of cars, and then nothing again. Right. And there's always this zigzag of how do you maneuver this and what's going on. And then just the worries of the accidents coming, because there's people are getting tired. No one really can see what, it can get very dangerous if you're not prepared for it. But yeah, like particularly I was working on was primarily just they were basically tunneling a trench for utility pipes, and they were going at a depth between 10 to 20 feet, and would just descend further and further and further, and then the crews would be using interesting techniques I've never even seen before, like things that I only thought of only occurred in World War I, where they're using wood planks to hold everything up, and you think this is a street. like I thought we had shoring boxes, but no, it's everyone with a shovel and a flute down there just shoveling and putting in trenches and waiting for the Jerry's, apparently. So, but anyways, I digress. I'm saying too much. I'm probably going to get fired now, but the truth must hold. The truth out there.
Very good. There's so much that you touched on there, Neil. I know you sort of alluded to, well, in CRM, it's like this. I was wondering if you could just take a moment and talk about how you got into this, what you did before, a little bit about Neil.
Oh, yeah. Okay. I can do that.
Yeah. My
original career was actually in film and visual effects. So I had to spend the last 10 years of my life doing visual effects stuff. So for people who don't know what that is, that's kind of like digitally removing people's age crow's feet on their faces, or like explosions of cars and things, or making sure Spider-Man's hand was the right color of red, things like that. And I had my Spartan death, Star Wars 7. That was the time I finally kind of had a mental breakdown, decided I don't want to do this. And my war cry for the last 10 years was, give me a reason to quit, give me a reason to go back to grad school. And then suddenly I burned out and I went, well, crap. Now I got to go back to grad school, So I decided to go in for anthropology, because I'd always been fascinated with it. And I was always worried I wasn't good enough to do it. But then when I signed up and got in and realized I could, I don't have to start from the beginning. I could actually do a post-baccalaureate, which is basically a bachelor's program, moving right into the master's. I was like, oh, this is amazing. Let me do it. So it took me about roughly 4 years to get my master's. I did try a spat before when I was in grad school with one CRM firm, and I think I only had one job over the 3 months I was hired there. And sorry, I'm laughing about it because I had a funny experience in that one. I was really nervous since I'd always had that imposter syndrome that I'm not supposed to be here and I'm not supposed to be here. I mean, like the interview I had was literally a faceless corporation because no one was in the office. Everyone was on a telecom. And I guess that's quite normal, especially in this day and age. But this was pre-COVID. So anyways, I remember going to this one particular site thinking, oh man, I'm late, I'm going to go in. And then everyone kept giving me this look of, you're not supposed to be here. And then my mind was thinking, oh, you construction workers, I know how this goes. And I was like, no, I know the ground has already been dug, but it's probably on the side. It probably is something that hasn't been touched. That's why my company sent me here. Then sure as heck, I get a phone call and they're like, yeah, you're not supposed to be there. We changed schedule last night. I was like, oh, well, this is awkward. And I was like, look at those pipes. Those are clay. And they're like, yeah, we made them yesterday. Oh, all right. Well, I'm going to go then. And then I was never called back. After that experience, after COVID and all that, there one particular company took a chance with me because they saw I had a master's and I had good rapport with them. So they've been basically helping me out with this one particular project. They have a great mentoring system, and that's how I got in now. And then, like Dr. Kinkella or Andrew, however you want to be called now.
Please, Dr. Professor Genius Andrew Kinkella.
Dr. Professor Genius Costco member Andrew Kinkella.
Wait, not executive holder. Not executive Costco member? Well,
sorry. That's an extra 2 years.
He is a professor after all. He can't afford the executive.
Yeah, the executive. Sorry, apologies. The executive. So thank you for letting me partake in your field school. That also helped a lot in making me understand just the process and how it all comes together. However, in my experience then diving in, it was a completely different ballgame. I was definitely more ready, and I was supposed to be there.
Congratulations.
Yeah. And the night shift stuff was interesting because the area that we're working on particularly is more historical.
Right.
And there are just so many different levels of historical artifacts and potential things that could be found going all the way back, basically to pre-contact time, all the way forward to like 1905.
Yep.
And the other parts is just interesting because like a lot of academia, no offense, we focus on lithics and paleo a lot. We focus on pre-contact. It's almost like, like one of the things was, can you tell me if the storm drain was made by Henry Hamlin in 1911? And I'm like, yeah. Yes, it is. We're gonna have to. Yeah, it definitely is. It checks out. He was a big guy there, so don't worry, I'm not.
Right. No.
Yeah.
And again, you've brought up so much stuff that's also another sort of side topic, the importance of knowing historic archaeology. I find that with a lot of people in archaeology, there's kind of a dearth of historic archaeology abilities. Talk about something they do not teach much in college. I personally was lucky enough to learn quite a bit about that, but I took history classes, about that kind of stuff specifically. But I know how tough that can be.
Mm-hmm.
I think it definitely depends on the professors that are at your school.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously there are some. We had one where I went, and he was primarily historics, and so. But other than that, I mean, if you don't have that, you're really not going to get exposure to historic archaeology.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately. Neil, where did you go to school for
my master's
accelerated
program? It was my accelerated program. I went to Cal State Northridge.
They're doing accelerated program there?
They're doing a post-baccalaureate for those who have a bachelor's degree that
already.
Is not
okay.
Yeah. Okay. So anyone. Yeah.
That was the reason I was asking, is because I know UCLA has a accelerated program where you get your bachelor's and your master's at the same time. I'm not a fan personally of that, but that's not what this podcast is about. But yeah, since you already had a bachelor's, and then I understand that. I didn't know. I went to CSUN. That's where I graduated from.
Oh, okay. So, okay.
Yep.
Yeah, go Matadors.
Helene Rouget was my advisor.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah.
I've seen several people do that sort of accelerated thing where they come in with a bachelor's, from somewhere else, and they go to CSUN and they kind of hook them up with, I
get that.
Yeah.
I just, the starting from scratch where you've never even been to college before, and then accelerated getting a bachelor's and a master's in 4 years.
Yeah. I'm not
impressed with that at all.
I'm not a fan. No, of that type of thing. No.
So I'm curious, what kind of preparation did the company give you prior to going into the night monitoring?
Yeah.
Well, first off, it was basically talking about the PPEs, which is your protective gear, making sure that my helmet and my boots and everything were up to code, because there are different types that call for different situations. There was also a lot of making sure that I had the right vest on, whether it be a long sleeve vest with bigger, brighter reflectors or just a regular red and reflector type vest. Mainly, the idea was that if you're walking around the road, you need a specific type of reflector so that cars can see you. Right. Or if you're just right there in the tunnels with the boys in the trenches, then you're fine. And the thing is that depending on how deep you're going to be going, basically general rule of thumb is once you've reached 8 to 10 feet, you cannot be standing over the edge to watch. You actually have to stay 4 to 6 feet behind a rail that is set up to watch it. And one of the things I found interesting was that after a certain point, the old techniques of, hey, stop, and throwing a rock and hopefully it hits the area you want them to stop at, stops working. And I basically had to get myself a laser pointer just so I could get just to point at potential artifacts a lot faster. Yeah, a lot of them also ask for harnesses, but that's a special type of training. It's actually more likely that you will be asked to stand 4 to 6 feet behind the rail when that is going on. And yeah, I mean, after a certain point, I think I was basically just becoming a madman. I even got myself like a old school periscope. One of those like old trench periscopes that people had just so I could look over the rail without actually being in trouble or written up by the safety inspectors.
You were just going for the image in the first Indiana Jones movie where he's up on top of the thing and there's the silhouette as the sun's going down. That's really all you were trying to plan for, I'm assuming, right?
No, I just happened to have a whip with me when that was
just coincidence. Yeah, coincidence.
Where did this come from?
and I was like, oh, wait, it's night shift. I'm not going to see any sun coming to tell me where everything was. I should have studied this in 495.
I know, right? You know what? Just as we're closing out the segment, I got to follow up to Heather's question, because when she asked you, how did they prepare you for this? I was actually kind of thinking, how did they prepare you archaeologically for this? Because as somebody who's, relatively new in the field, we talk about this all the time on this podcast. In the past 10 years of doing this show, monitors are always the green people in the field. And it's like,
Yeah.
I'm just wondering how much theoretical or contextual knowledge did they give you of what you could be finding and actually what to look for did they give you? And this is not a slight on the company you're working for by any means whatsoever. It's kind of a consistent thing across the field, it seems like. So just curious about that.
Well, one thing that's pretty good about my company is that also, because we're working with a bunch of other groups as well. It's not just one. This is like a joint effort. There is a general information that's given by the POC, which means point of contact for those who are unsure. So we do get a printout, and we do get just a very big brief paragraph of okay, so be on the lookout for this or be on the lookout for that. You will be in this area. However, sometimes they won't give you a map and they won't give you too much detail. Basically, the idea is you want to be their eyes and ears. If we find something, then it's on a need to know basis, right? Which I do have stories for later on, but not this one. And I have to make sure I'm not going to get hunted. So, but the preparation part is basically just knowing, okay, it's a historic area. It is culturally sensitive. You may run into this, and that. And then that would be the end of it. And then the idea is you build up experience the longer you're in that site of understanding what's there, because when you find things, it's almost like a game. Once you find it and then you call it in and send pictures, that's when there's oh, okay, here's all the information you need. Here's everything you got. This is what we were thinking about, and you found it. Congratulations. Now construction can break it because it's insignificant, but keep going.
Sounds like an escape room or something.
That's kind of how I feel. But I mean, I guess night shift wise, I'll tell you one thing that was funny was there was an area where we were working, same thing, utility pipe stuff, and it was a little bit higher. It's only about 6 feet. And I remember we came across a bunch of structures, and I was thinking, well, it must be an old structure. And they're like, no, this is really old. This is 100 years at the least. And I was like, okay, let me take a look. And I'd be sending pictures to everyone, and everyone would be like, yeah, it totally is, but we don't quite know what it is yet. So just hold off. And then what blew my mind was after a whole week of us, putting the papers together and them finally getting back to me about it, basically construction was still able to go through because they were only parallel to the wall, not necessarily destroying it. All of a sudden I noticed across the street, there's a mural painted of the actual building of that place. And this whole little blurb written about it. And I felt like such an idiot that here I'm contacting my POC and everyone. We're all desperately trying to get information. And then suddenly I look across the street. I should have been just staring at that the whole time, that it's right there. Because the moment the picture came in, I was like, oh man, it's the exact same picture. How is this possible?
Nice.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's not necessarily a fault on them. I should have also been looking up as I go, but it's also how do you look up in your car with your cell phone really quick, or when you're in the trench trying to figure that out?
Neil, you've learned nothing from my classes. Okay. That's what I've learned.
Well,
if only they were lithics. If only I was looking at lithics.
All right. Well, with Andrew's realization that no one's been listening to him this whole time he's been teaching, let's go ahead and take it to our first break. And we'll be back with more with Neil and Andrew and Heather and all of us on the other side of the break. Back in a minute. Looking to expand your knowledge of X-rays and imaging in the archaeology field? Then check out An Introduction to Paleoradiography, a short online course offering professional training for archaeologists and affiliated disciplines. Created by archaeologist, radiographer, and lecturer James Elliott, the content of this course is based upon his research and teaching experience in higher education. It is approved by the Register of Professional Archaeologists and the Chartered Institute for Archaeologists as 4 hours of training. So don't miss out on this exciting opportunity for professional and personal development. For more information on pricing and course structure, visit paleoimaging.com. That's PALEO imaging.com, and check out the link in the show notes. Welcome back to episode 236 of the CRM Archaeology podcast. And we are talking about the curse of the night monitor. Although I think it's probably the benefit of the night monitor from the sounds of it. It sounds kind of fun. But I mean, when I was in the Navy, I worked night shifts like the whole time I was in the Navy practically. And I just got to say, there's something about the night shift, even though you're just still working hard, you're still doing your job. There's something about just like when half the world is asleep, half the world around you anyway is asleep, and it's fewer people, and it's almost more focusing. I don't know. It's just it's a different experience entirely. And I've never night monitored for archaeology. And I have a question about that later. But before I get to that, Neil, I'm just wondering, with your, Hollywood background, so to speak, before being an archaeologist, do you miss it at all? I mean, do you still like freelance doing that kind of stuff? I just feel like those creative sort of energies, while could be expressed in archaeology in various ways, it's a very, very different thing that you're doing right now. And do you have any regrets? Do you still keep a toe in that kind of business? Like, how do you manage both, like, in your headspace?
That's a very good question, because, I mean, in my previous experience, I mean, we used to have a joke, especially now that we're talking about night shift and day shift. At one point in my career, I was living in Vancouver and I had to manage night and day shift. And I was working like 20-hour days for like a whole year. And I was like, and I even like went delusional where I thought I saw the IT department appear and disappear, only to find out I had actually fallen asleep on my desk staring at a screen, So the joke we used to have in VFX is, what do you call someone who works 80 to 100 hours a week? We call them half day.
Half day.
Yeah. So like there are parts that I miss, which is the camaraderie and working for something awesome, and that whole like, well, sorry, that's there's a whole mentality to VFX artists in general, which is like we swear a lot more than construction workers, for sure. We have a lot more to prove because we're sitting behind a desk and no one respects us. I mean, we're probably one of the only post-production fields that have no union, and whenever it's brought up, we're shot down and we're outsourced. I mean, like, I was given so many options of like, we could either make you a lead here or you could be a manager in India. And then I'd be like, well, crap, I'm going to India then. And, I was in India for like collectively about a year, Vancouver for about a year and a half. And then I was in China for a different company for about 2 months. And what I loved about was just traveling and understand cultures. I think that's probably why I ended up going back to school to become pretty much an archaeologist and an anthropologist in some ways. But the parts I do miss, I think, is just basically just the creative process of like, how do you create things? How do you build something from nothing? I mean, like, granted, like, I still get the, and forgive me because you briefly mentioned you're in the Navy, but I have VFX PTSD in the sense of like, anytime anyone's like, yeah, it's easy, can you just do a quick graphic? I start shaking and swearing and saying, what's the bid? How dare you do this to me? You should have given me 24-hour notice. Now it's a 911. How dare you?
Well,
I get
Neil,
yeah.
I've got news for you. You just went from one pool to the next.
Oh, wow.
Of the same thing. I was going to say, talk about all this not represented, not appreciated, not understood, asking for things last minute. That may come a little bit later in your CRM career, but yeah, I just, just to dash all your dreams and everything. You just went from one misery to the next. But no. Yeah, I'm curious what differences and actually what kind of skills do you think that it could just be personal skills, do you think that you have carried over from the one discipline to the next? I'm actually a second career. Oh. This is my second career as well. So really? That's where I'm kind of coming from that.
Understood. One of the things that did help that I brought over is that no matter what in visual effects, you're always supposed to have a positive attitude. And that it would be the idea being that if everyone's under the cooker and we're all in the studio, we have to figure out a way to be nice to each other. Right.
Right.
That's one thing I did bring over, where I do my best to keep any situation easygoing and fun. I mean, like, I know I can be also just kind of annoying. Andrew can tell you that.
Oh, so annoying.
But it's one of those that I try to bring that. We also have like mutual respect for each other, so we don't particularly like. Actually, sorry, similarities, not flashbacks. Sorry. The other part is just having a lot of patience, especially when there's a lot of pressure to show up on time and make sure that you're on the right project and things. That's also a VFX thing.
Right. You know what? I would just break in to say, Neil, I totally noticed those kind of skills, when you were out in the field, like the patience thing. You were a very patient daily, student at the site. Like you took things as they came and sort of very much rolled with the punches, and maybe, that sort of transposes over to the earlier Hollywood career.
I mean, because in the end of the day, we're all in it, right? It's not about us. It's the greater good, right? It's making sure that your movie gets up, because in the end, we don't give a crap about film. We give a crap about the 10 minutes when our name appears on the black screen in the end. Right. That's what we really care about. Or at least that's what I cared about. Maybe everyone else really wants to change a shade on Spider-Man's freaking hand and live happily. I don't know. Sorry, I'm just whatever.
It's all right.
Yeah,
you're among friends.
Yeah, exactly. The other stuff that came through is the green laser pointer. That actually used to be something we used to do in QC.
That laser pointer thing I think is genius, and I'd like to expand on some of that as we talk too. Your tips, for night monitoring.
Okay. Yeah. No worries. And also, basically, concept art sketches actually help a lot, especially if we're out in the field drawing. And the idea is that although the names are a little bit different, the way I remember it is top view, side view, 3/4 view. And I'm talking about like character design and things like that.
Sure.
So when we're out in the field doing a sketch map, it's top view, no point per view, top view, 3/4 view, right? We're doing that. And then I think that the first few logs I made a mistake because I was doing angle shots of like stuff we were finding,
right.
Where it's like, okay, we're doing the 3/4 angle, so I know it's from this distance and top and side. And they're like, no, you just need a top.
Yeah,
you just need a top and a scale. And I'd be like, yeah, but I'm almost done with the shading. Don't worry, I'm almost done. Come on,
right.
Just give it to me.
I just imagine your site sketches are like a comic book sketch, and you've got like wham up in the corner, like where the
extreme zoom in.
That's hilarious.
Yeah. So those things carried over. Personal skills are definitely important. When I was a trainer, a global trainer / lead artist in India, my job was also to write no end of log reports every night about, number one, what's going on,
right?
Where are we at? I was about to say what the depth is, but I mean, like technically there's depth. Also, we have to do fake parallax and all that stuff.
Sure.
So that stuff carried over as well. I think the difference is I got the feeling that people in CRM, I guess I'm new, so I'm novice by saying this. They're a bit more easygoing than, let's say, a producer breathing down your neck and asking how come 48 shots aren't done yet and it's only 5.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah. Just wait, Neil.
Oh, just wait.
Just wait.
Okay. It's coming.
Yeah.
Yeah. So and people are genuinely, I feel like there's definitely more of a feeling of we're doing this because we love it. In VFX, at least my generation was, we're doing it until that director position opens, or we're doing it until my acting career takes off. It was always kind of a standby place. And then it's only recently after the successes of like Neil Blomkamp, people like that, where everyone's like, no, we now want to be VFX artists. And it always blows my mind when I've actually met younger archaeologists who tell me that they want to, and I kind of blink, why do you want to hurt yourself? And then it just blows my mind. Like, we're two mirrors staring at each other, if that makes any sense.
Right. Neil, back to some of those sort of tips and stuff. I'm just trying to call these because you throw out some great ideas, the spyglass, dude, this is great. That totally, it sounds funny, but it totally makes sense. I was wondering if you have any tips. The thing that used to be the toughest for me in night monitoring was those lights, those super bright lights at night, they just make everything look gray. They make everything look like just like this two-dimensional, washed out gray moonscape. Right. And it's like, I'm like, how am I going to see the mono in this? For me personally, I used to always try and conserve my night vision, like consciously, like don't look at any bright lights, right. But do you have any tips or tricks on that seeing through the moonscape?
The main trick is just getting used to how things reflect is something that I use, right? Because that will, the texture of what we're seeing will help if you can tell where the angle of the light is coming from. Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
And the other part that I learned how to get over that as well is that only works 1% of the time. The other time is you have to build a lot of trust with the construction workers you're working with, especially if it's night shift, because you have to trust them that they're not going to run off with half the stuff and just not tell you what they find.
Mm-hmm.
and the other part is there has to be a middle ground on that. I relied heavily on them because they are in there and I'm not allowed to go in. Right.
Right.
And all I can do is stare from my periscope, which they all found hilarious. You know, because they were saying you could just get a GoPro and send it down then. but they found it endearing and they all took turns looking at it on their break. So
of course.
Yeah. The trick was just making sure that I could just understand where the light source is coming from and then how it was hitting things, just to tell the differences. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Yeah, that's great. That totally makes sense.
Yeah, it's the only thing I could.
And my other sort of thing that I'm curious about, that even when you have the night shift and you're prepared, there is that moment when you get tired. There's that like lull about 2/3 of the way through where you're like, oh man, I'm tired. Do you have any tips or tricks to like keep focus? Because you can stay awake, but like the focus part can get so difficult. Is there anything that you do for that?
Stretching is something that helped me. Basically just twisting and stretching so your back wouldn't hurt, and then just rolling it, and then I guess on the breaks, basically just I don't know how to explain it. It's like blink exercises. Basically, that's something I learned in VFX, because after a certain point, you don't blink because you're used to staring frame by frame when things are going by to see a mistake.
Oh yeah. So
you have to kind of force yourself to blink every now and then. So the idea is if you do blink exercises on your break, you don't actually go to sleep, right? Mm-hmm. But your eyes just feel refreshed. Those are some of the tricks I did. I mean, other times it was basically just staying by the diesel generators that generated a lot of heat and smoke near the exhaust.
Right.
So then the idea is that the smell of the exhaust, which is probably bad because we'll probably pass out, but the smell of the the heat alone, actually, the feeling of that heat next to your leg, will actually keep you up. So, I mean, not to burn yourself, but just so that it keeps you from falling asleep.
Right. That's archaeology, though. You just suffer enough pain just to keep you going.
Exactly.
That's,
right.
Yeah.
The cold always kind of keeps me awake, but everybody's different, and trying to figure out, what works for you. I'm curious, did they so it sounds like there was a safety officer on the site. So, was there any training? Did you have any training? That would be one thing that I would, when we do have night monitoring, we have some projects that are night monitoring. A lot of it tends to be like highway monitoring. So that's obviously another kind of, or street monitoring. That's something that is, has its own dangers, especially at night, because people that are driving at night are either sleepy or unfortunately sometimes intoxicated. And so just keeping the safety, being aware all the time. It's not just, having that tunnel vision of being an archaeologist and looking for what you would look for as an archaeologist, but also keeping yourself safe.
Yeah. The beauty of the place that I'm working on, especially on the site, there was no end of safety training that was paid for. So there was a lot of safety training that I had to qualify for before we could even begin, and it was paid for by the company. So there was a lot of safety reviews, safety training, safety classes, and then the idea was once I was certified, they'd give me stickers and I'd be good to go. Yeah.
Good.
So yeah, it was very professional in that sense. I was very fortunate about that. Classes I don't have to pay for.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, well, brave new world.
We've talked about this in the past. When you're starting, just for somebody who's new in CRM, new-ish, if you shouldn't be paying for classes once you start working for a CRM company, especially if it's classes that are required for a project. You should never pay for those.
No.
So.
Yeah.
The one exception I would possibly say is if you plan to work on any mining projects, especially in Nevada, but mining pretty much anywhere, but mining's just heavy in Nevada. If you can and you have the money and the time, go get your MSHA certification on your own. And I'm only saying that because a company, if you work for them long enough, obviously they will send you to MSHA training and they'll send you to the refresher as well. But sometimes, like all companies, they're trying to get people at the last minute, and you just can't get MSHA scheduled in time. It's just not possible unless they have their own trainer.
Like Cass Walker. That's
Exactly. Yeah. Some of that stuff that's difficult to get scheduled. It's like months and months out. Just kind of get it done if you ever think you want to go get one of those jobs or, something like that. That's the only thing I would say.
Okay.
Let's go ahead and take this to break. And when we come back, we'll finish out with some other tips and some other questions about night monitoring. Back in a minute. Welcome back to episode 236 of the CRM Archaeology podcast. And this is the third and final segment. And Neil, I just got to ask you, and maybe not just Neil, but Andrew and Heather as well, because to be honest, I've worked in various parts of California, technically Southern California, but really more Southeastern California. I've never really worked in like the Los Angeles or San Diego area or anything like that. I had never even heard of night monitoring until Andrew put the card together for our notes. I didn't even know night monitoring was a thing. And to be honest, I haven't monitored that much in my career anyway. I've done a lot of survey, a lot of data recovery, but I just haven't been in that many areas where we had to monitor pretty consistently. It's just not something that I've been exposed to. So do you guys know, and I know a lot of your experience is California as well, is this a common thing in California? Is this like it happens occasionally, or, what's the deal there?
It is. I would say of all the projects that we have, I mean, it's a small percentage, but it depends. There's usually two reasons. Either you have nighttime, anytime you're driving around, you see nighttime construction. Why is that usually? It's usually because you're trying to minimize the impact, right, on traffic. And then the other is how quickly jobs need to get done. So there's projects that for grant purposes or for lots of different, just cost efficiencies that they're trying to get just blaze through all the tasks. And so a lot of times the night monitoring is for that reason. But, there's a lot of projects that we bid on that, I have assumptions in all of our proposals that have that assumption where it does not include night monitoring. However, we can adjust the scope, right, and cost. Because a lot of times these projects will transition into night monitoring, but they don't start that way. So a lot of the nighttime monitoring, you're told, oh no, there's not going to be a nighttime monitoring. And then they start getting to the end where it's crunch time and they got to get stuff done.
Well, now related to that, Heather, I know a lot of times in other industries when there is a night shift situation, and again, like Neil mentioned, the words night shift have different definitions, like you have to work past a certain time or whatever the case may be. But does your company or does anybody want to volunteer if there's like a shift bonus? Yeah, do you get paid more for night monitoring?
It depends.
Yeah.
Typically not. In this, it's typically not. You don't get paid more. Okay. The one thing that you really have to be careful for, and I would say for the listeners, if they're considering night monitoring, some people unfortunately look at it as something to supplement their other work. And so we actually had somebody who was working as needed and was working for another company and had not disclosed to us that they had done a day shift. And then they went straight to a night shift. They were driving our truck and they wrecked the truck at the end of their night shift because they fell asleep at the wheel. And so, that is one thing that people just have to understand. Night work is night work. Yeah. It's never good to have, do it on the tail end of a day shift or to go straight into a day shift after a night shift. And those are the temptations. There are times where you do, it depends. I mean, a lot of it is budget. We don't charge more for night monitoring typically, and construction workers don't get more money typically for night monitoring. It is considered a shift. It's a shift, and some people really like it, and some people hate it. So you just, thank goodness it doesn't come around that often.
Other industries I've worked in, that I've heard about anyway, they only gave a shift bonus because they couldn't get anybody to do it. Like nobody wanted to work from 11 o'clock at night to 7 o'clock in the morning, right? So they had to pay more and said, hey, your base salary is this, but we'll give you an extra $250, to work this shift. So
that's all negotiable.
Yeah, for sure. Along these lines, another follow-up, and again, possibly for you, Heather, as a principal investigator, when you're finding something at 3 o'clock in the morning, who do you call? Like, is somebody
me? Me? Yeah. That's, those are the things that happen. I've had probably one call. It was for human remains, which ended up not being that. But yeah, I mean, it's just
part of the job, huh?
It's just part of the job. I mean, we have it. at least I'm not the one out there the whole time. But I've only had a couple times where, I think that the monitors are a little bit more careful about reaching out.
I bet.
We always had this policy, reach out anytime. You have any question whatsoever. That makes them think a little bit harder before they send out a text at 2 a.m. in the morning. But yeah.
But you gotta make sure that they're the kind of people that don't get scared about waking somebody up at 2 a.m. Like if they need to, they need to. You know what I mean? Yeah.
I mean, this is we've talked about this on the show a lot. Monitors should not be green archaeologists. But to me, even night monitoring should be even a step above that. Right. Because it is difficult for all the reasons that you guys are discussing. It's difficult to do this. It's difficult to see. I mean, I think it's awesome. A really good point that Andrew made is that everything kind of just ends up looking the same. You have to adjust your eyes. And, monitoring is about being able to see the irregular in the baseline. And the baseline isn't every project is the same, right? You have to go in there, you have to assess, okay, what's my baseline of soil? What's my baseline of disturbed? What's my baseline of kind of debris? And then have that baseline in your head so that when something pops out, the irregularity, because you're not going to have a certain, like if it's a historic where you have just the whole bottle just pops out. I mean, you're going to have the corner of a bottle, right? So you have to be able to see these things outside of the context of the full artifact. And that takes some training. And it takes not only training, actually, more than that, it takes experience of having done this over and over and over again. So for yes, it's difficult to find people to do that work, although there are some people that really like night work. But
yeah, I feel like I would.
Yeah, it's difficult to find somebody, but at the same time, like when we're putting somebody out there, a lot of it is, and this could be the case for Neil's company, is that a lot of times these night work is just, it's required and there's not even any sensitivity at all. And so then you're a little bit more free with who you put out there. We have some projects that there's no reason why. I mean, everything is disturbed. Imported fill. It's not even like it's disturbed and it's fill from the area and they still want monitoring. Then I'm okay with putting somebody out there to give them experience and just understanding a construction site and everything. But
yeah, I want to make sure that people listening, like Heather, your situation in terms of that people can call you anytime. That's like the golden situation. In my experience way back when, it was just like, oh, it's 3:30 in the morning and you found something. Well, you better deal with it, because there's no office, there's nobody there. You don't have a phone number. You're just out there. So, I just want to make sure that that people know it's not always so nice like that. That sometimes you do have to be like, well, I'll deal with this, on the fly in the moment, or worst case, I'll call the office at like 8:30 in the morning when they open.
Well, when you start a monitoring project, at least for us, we typically, it's becoming more and more common now. You have that what we call WEAP, Workers Environmental Awareness Program Training. So it's like a cultural awareness. If it's just cultural or it's bio, they call it WEAP. Nice. Makes you weep.
That's what I'm thinking. Yeah.
and along with that, we always create a pamphlet, and so that pamphlet goes with every construction worker that's been trained. And in that pamphlet are all the contacts names, and the PI for the project is on there, along with the human osteologist for the project is on there, and their phone numbers to contact them. So, once your name is on one of those pamphlets, you can expect to get those kind of phone calls. So and that should be the way it is really. I mean, that's why they're paying us to be out there, right?
Of course. On a slightly different topic that you brought up momentarily a while back, Heather, you brought up the cold of working in the, as a night monitor, and you said, oh, that's what kept you awake. I always found that dealing with the cold was a little bit difficult, even though it's coming. And just to circle back to Neil, I'm wondering if you have anything that you do for the cold, because when you sit there and it's like 3 a.m, you have that dip where it gets colder than you even think it's going to get, and do you have things that keep you warm?
I actually have a trusty coat I have that I either put on or take off depending on how hot or cold it gets, because we are in California and it does shift, especially in the night. I also wear neck gaiters. I don't know if you guys know what that is.
No.
Oh, yeah.
Sort of.
They're kind of like round. They look like someone cut the turtleneck off of a shirt.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like a stocking for your neck that it can also wrap around your head and your face.
Yeah.
So the idea is that they're UV protected. They're about like $7 for like 3. They come in handy because like I can wrap. Basically, I had no idea that your nose and ears would get super cold at night and get very uncomfortable. With these type of gaiters, I just pull it over my head and then put my helmet back on. And generally, just breathing into the gaiter itself keeps my face warm, and it kind of makes it more comfortable. So it's primarily just layers and gaiters.
Mm-hmm.
I think the one thing that I've noticed over time is that, we're not out there in these elements all the time as archaeologists, right? Sometimes people monitor, sometimes you do surveys, sometimes whatever, field work. And so the tools of the trade are generally going to be better known by construction workers that are in that environment all the time. And I think some of the tips and tricks that I've seen to just bear the elements in general, cold, hot, whatever, have always come from the construction workers. They have such great, they're in it all the time. And so I would say for our listeners, if you're ever kind of curious and you're on a construction site, look around, be aware, see what people are wearing. It used to be archaeologists never used to have those neck protectors off the back of their hard hat. Now everybody does it, because that started with the construction workers. So another thing that if you don't use in, Neil, that I think is a real good, but this comes back from my hockey days, and that is those little hand warmers where you can just put them in your pockets and they stay for, 5 or 6 hours. And they're really hot in the beginning, but then they're at least warm at the end of your shift. And you just put your hands in there, that warms up your hands. Or they also have these vests now that have the coils in them that will keep you warm. Mm-hmm. And so it kind of keeps your core body heat in. And those are they're huge.
Heated jackets.
Help so much. Yeah.
Okay.
But this is Southern California, though. It doesn't get cold. So
it can get pretty cold. At night it can.
Yep.
Yeah. Especially if you're standing in it for hours and hours.
I'm sure. All right. Well, we are coming perilously close to the end of this podcast. I'm just wondering if anybody has any final tips and tricks or anything else that we haven't mentioned. It's kind of a free for all for those of you that have done this, since I have literally no experience doing this.
Yeah, Neil, any last things for you? Stuff you've been wanting to talk about this?
No, I think I pretty much covered it and incriminated myself. There's a record now, but no, everything I've mentioned is good. I mean, my experience in night shift wasn't as bad, just because I trusted the people I was working with, and I got used to looking at the corners and edges when we're using humongous lights, and it was basically a learning experience of how much you can handle and how to communicate. Because what you guys were saying was you are alone out there. And you really have to just trust yourself, and then also just when you make the final call, understand it's 3 a.m. in the morning and no one's going to be awake, and and you are going to be that person that calls them.
Neil, I'm wondering as well, with this being a second career for you, which is not super uncommon in archaeology, in CRM, where do you want to go with this? Where do you want to? It's a very different question when you ask this of a 22-year-old, but where do you want to take your CRM and or archaeological career? Staying in CRM, going into the academic sphere, what are your goals?
That's a very good question, and the older I get, it becomes harder to answer, because
right.
Let's put it this way. If you asked me that question about 11 years ago, I would have told you I want to become the next James Cameron. Yeah.
Right.
And then now that didn't happen. I'm here. And the question is, what do I want to do? I'm kind of playing it now, 5-year intervals, but I'm probably going to stay in it. And maybe if I get the academic bug, I'll go back. But the problem is academic, it's, you have to believe in the faith, if that makes any sense. You have to believe in the faith, and you have to understand that it's a choice for your life.
Yep.
And
the nice thing about being in archaeology, I've mentioned lots of times on this show and other shows that I do, I don't do a lot of field work anymore. Right. But that's by choice because I'm trying to do things in my non-archaeological life that help me fund the things I really want to do in my archaeology life that aren't really making any money and probably never will make a lot of money, like this podcast and the entire archaeology podcast network. It's very difficult to monetize that kind of thing, but I'm very incredibly passionate about making sure that it succeeds. I mean, we're on pace to get 1.2 million downloads this year, and that is
wow.
An incredible amount of, it's an incredible, that's across the whole network. Definitely not this show. You've got to be a psychopath to just listen to this show if you're not a CRM archaeologist.
Right.
But that being said, across the whole network, we're on track for that right now with our current downloads from January. And that kind of outreach is just something I'm incredibly passionate about. So what I'm telling you is, I mean, there's so many different ways that you could go and keep your feet in this space. Cause I'm even thinking, why ignore your first career? You know what I mean? There's so many avenues where there could be some sort of intersection here. I mean, I've talked to a lot of people just on the side about, you see all these reality TV shows out there, and there's always talk some people about some sort of CRM, reality show following an excavation or people. There's so many legal loopholes that would have to be jumped through to make that actually happen and put some of that on camera. But the more people we get from other industries that have backgrounds or connections into those areas, the more that becomes somewhat of a possibility. So,
just talking to you in this last hour, I think there's some really good examples of, when you do come from, no matter what that area is, when you come from and you have some life experience, troubleshooting is one of the biggest skill sets that you have that comes with just age, life experience. Yeah.
That is true.
Absolutely.
That is
Absolutely.
true. And I mean, I guess I'm always open for new things, and there is the creative part that is still in there. And I don't know, maybe we'll do a TV show of the anthropology of visual effects. And
there you go. It could happen. It could happen. Make sure your LinkedIn profile is up to date.
Well, I mean, like I do alias blogs and other things too. So I'll keep an eye out. I want to keep it easy this time. I don't want to commit. and burn out and end up becoming building sailboats or something. Yeah.
That's right.
Nothing wrong with sailboats.
Nothing wrong with sailboats. I just want to sail away.
One.
That's right. All right. Well, on that note, let's go ahead and end the show. Neil, thanks so much for coming on the show. This was
thanks for having me.
When Andrew proposed the topic, I'm like, what are we going to talk about for the other two segments? This is really good. But
see, I know things.
That's right. So
I know things.
I know. I didn't say anything. I was like, well, we'll just see how it goes. But no, this has been really good. And it's, to be honest,
the Machiavellian in him.
I know, in 236 episodes of doing this show, a lot of times we end up coming around to regular topics that we've talked about before, only because things change every few years, right? And it's worth bringing it up again. But I think we've literally never talked about this before. I don't think it's even ever come up, and it's fantastic to have a brand new content on this show. So if you're listening to this, listeners, please share this episode, because people don't share it enough, but share it because it's an interesting thing, and it's it's something you might be exposed to, especially if you work in areas that do this quite a bit. So with that, we will say goodbye, and we'll see you guys in a couple of weeks. That's it for another episode of the CRM Archaeology Podcast. Links to some of the items mentioned on the show are in the show notes for this podcast, which can be found at www.archpodnet.com/CRMArchPodcast. Please comment and share anywhere you see the show. If you'd like us to answer a question in a future episode, email us. Use the contact form on the website, or just email chris@archaeologypodcastnetwork.com. Support the show and the network at archpodnet.com/members. Get some swag and extra content while you're there. Send us show suggestions and interview suggestions. We want this to be a resource for field technicians everywhere, and we want to know what you want to know about. Thanks to everyone for joining me this week. Thanks also to the listeners for tuning in, and we'll see you in the field. Goodbye.
Bye, everyone.
See you guys next time.
Bye.
This episode was produced by Chris Webster from his RV traveling the United States, Tristan Boyle in Scotland, DigTech LLC, Cultural Media, and the Archaeology Podcast Network, and was edited by Chris Webster.
This has been a presentation of the Archaeology Podcast Network. Visit us on the web for show notes and other podcasts at www.archpodnet.com. Contact us at chris@archaeologypodcastnetwork.com.